The room smelled like old money and colder intentions. Crystal glasses reflected the overhead lights like tiny, indifferent chandeliers. I sat at the long walnut conference table, hands folded, pretending not to notice the tension in my stomach or the glint of satisfaction in my brother Jason's eyes. My parents flanked him like pillars, elegant, composed, proud of the son who fit perfectly into the mold they'd always wanted. Across from us, the family lawyer, Mr. Levingston, cleared his throat and shuffled a stack of beige folders. This was the trust fund reading, the moment they had built our lives around, and I already knew it wasn't going to go well for me. To Jason Allen Farrow, the lawyer began, a direct transfer of $2 million, effective immediately, and a 75% controlling interest in Farrow Ventures domestic holdings. Jason smiled, not even pretending to be surprised. My mother reached over and squeezed his hand with theatrical affection. My father gave him a single nod, the kind Jason had been chasing since we were kids. I felt the floor tilt beneath me, just slightly. Mr. Levingston flipped the page and turned to me. To Elise Marie Farrow. He hesitated. I didn't blink. Your parents have elected not to provide a direct financial disbursement at this time. The words hit like a slap. Clean, cold, corporate. My father leaned forward. Elise, this is not a punishment. We just believe you need to experience what it means to build something on your own. And you're capable. My mother chimed in, like it was a compliment. You don't need help like Jason does. Jason didn't look at me. He didn't have to. He already had everything he wanted. I stared at the polished table surface and tried not to let the hot rush of anger crawl up my throat. My jaw ached from clenching. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I just breathed through my nose and told myself I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. Then, something shifted. Mr. Levingston cleared his throat again. There is one more document, he said, his voice slightly quieter. My mother's posture stiffened. My father narrowed his eyes. Jason looked up, confused. The lawyer pulled out a separate folder. The paper inside looked older, hand-folded and sealed in a faded gray envelope. This, he said, was written by your grandfather, Raymond Farrow. It was not filed with the official trust documents, but it was kept in the Farrow family legacy vault. He left instructions for it to be read only in the event Elise received nothing from the family trust. Now they all looked at me. Mr. Levingston opened the envelope and began to read aloud. To Elise. If they're reading this, it means what I feared has come to pass. I tried to convince them otherwise, but I know my son too well. What I leave you cannot be measured in cash or shares. I leave you an opportunity. Go to the Farrow manufacturing plant. Number 2, yes, the one your father mothballed in 2012. Inside locker 317, you'll find what I set aside for you. Use the code BANYAN. My heart skipped. Jason turned to our parents. What the hell is he talking about? That plant was shut down years ago. My father said nothing. My mother looked like someone had dropped a lit match into her lap. Elise, the lawyer added carefully, this is entirely separate from the estate. No one can stop you from accessing it. I looked at all three of them. My parents, with their practiced detachment. Jason, still trying to do the math in his head. Something had just slipped out from under them, and they didn't know what it was yet. But I intended to find out. 2 days later, I drove alone to the edge of the industrial district on the south side of the city. The Farrow manufacturing plant No. 2 was easy to find. It was the only one with rusted-out gates and yellowed security signs still flapping in the wind. I parked outside the chain-link fence, climbed through a tear near the back, and made my way toward the main structure. The building looked like it had been swallowed by time-broken windows, weeds growing up through the asphalt, and a faded Pharaoh logo barely clinging to the wall like a ghost. Inside, the air was stale with dust and old ambition. I found the locker room by memory. My grandfather used to bring me here as a child. I would sit on the concrete bench outside the lab area and eat orange slices while he talked to the engineers about making things better, not just profitable. Locker 317 was in the back, buried beneath a pile of collapsed shelving. I cleared it, heart pounding. I typed in the code, Banyan. A soft click. The door opened. Inside a steel box, a thick leather-bound notebook, and a small black flash drive taped to the back cover. Beneath them, a document folder stamped with a title, Polymer R7 Prototype Zero Waste Initiative. There was also a USB-compatible portable video player. I pressed play. My grandfather's face appeared older, but sharp-eyed and alive. "If you're seeing this, Elise," he said, "then you've been cut out. And I'm sorry. But I knew this might happen, so I made you your own inheritance. What's in this locker is the future. A zero-waste polymer that could change packaging and construction industries. Your father shelved it because it wasn't profitable fast enough, but I always believed you'd know what to do with it." I sat down hard on the bench, the box in my lap, the notebook pressed to my chest. They gave Jason money. They gave me a chance to change everything. The drive home was a blur of taillights and static thoughts. I kept glancing at the passenger seat where the steel box and notebook sat like sacred relics. At every red light, I fought the urge to pull over and start reading the whole thing, but something in me insisted not like this, not in a car, not rushed. It deserved a place, a moment. That night, I cleared the dining table in my apartment, pushed aside the stacks of overdue bills, the unopened grant rejections, the half-written resumes. I laid out the contents of the locker like puzzle pieces waiting to be assembled. The notebook's leather cover was cracked with age, but inside, every page was careful, precise, alive. Grandpa had recorded everything: formulas, observations, failures, adjustments, lab notes in tiny, neat print, margins filled with questions like, can we make it food safe, and what if heat sealed at low temps? Even his doubts were captured. But threaded through it all was a quiet belief that this polymer R7 was something worth finishing. I opened the folder marked Legal. Inside early patent filings, dated nearly a decade ago, under a shell company named Banyan Materials, LLC with Grandpa as sole owner. Beneath them, a signed transfer form that listed my name as successor. He'd already prepared it. Years ago. No one else had known. The flash drive contained lab test videos, emails with researchers, and most critically, a detailed formula protocol. The last file was a scanned, handwritten note with just one sentence. If Elise wants this, she'll know what to do. And I did. Not everything. Not yet. But enough. I spent the next week chasing leads quietly. I didn't want anyone to know I had this, especially not Jason or my parents. They might have dismissed it as a sentimental dead end, but I knew better. What Grandpa had stored away wasn't just some idealistic science project, it was revolutionary. A biodegradable polymer, strong enough for construction, safe for packaging, designed to break down without releasing microplastics. No one else had cracked that. I contacted my old university advisor, Dr. Carla Eng, under the pretense of seeking lab space for a side project. She didn't ask too many questions. She always liked me, said I had a scientist's obsession and a politician's patience, which, coming from her, was a compliment. She offered me access to a shared materials lab after hours. So, every evening, while other researchers filtered out and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, I unpacked my grandfather's legacy. The first week was frustrating. I couldn't get the reaction to stabilize beyond 30 seconds. The mixture kept crystallizing. I burned through materials, snapped 2 pipette heads, and nearly caused a small fire when the polymer overheated. But I didn't give up. I read every note again, annotated every chemical ratio. I even started speaking to Grandpa's notebook aloud, like it could hear me. Why did you switch to glycol here? Or, come on. You knew this blend wouldn't hold at high humidity. It was lonely, exhausting work, but it was mine. And I could feel it growing roots inside me. After 2 weeks, I realized what was missing. The thermal curve needed a modified catalyst. One he hadn't tested. I found a modern equivalent in the materials database and adjusted the ratios. On day 15, I ran the test again. This time, it held 40 seconds, then a minute, then 5. The polymer cured, flexible, strong, and fully biodegradable when submerged in water and soil. I stood alone in that lab, holding a thin strip of R7 between my trembling fingers. I wanted to scream, or cry, or both, but instead, I laughed quiet and sharp like an exhale I'd been holding for years. It worked. I didn't sleep that night. I just stared at the sample like it was alive, like it had chosen me, too. The next morning, I emailed 2 people: Tara, a former grad school classmate who now worked in chemical engineering, and Micah, a data analyst turned agricultural sustainability nerd. Both had scrappy minds and a love for projects that felt impossible. We met that Saturday at a cafe. I didn't pitch. I told them the truth. My grandfather left me something. It was hidden. They buried it because it wasn't profitable fast enough. But it's real. I've seen it work. I just can't build this alone. Tara blinked. Are you saying you have a working zero-waste polymer? Micah leaned forward. Does it degrade cleanly? I pulled out a Ziploc bag with the cured sample and dropped it on the table. Take a look. By Monday, we were unofficially a team. We called ourselves Project Banyan, borrowed equipment, split rent on a tiny co-working lab outside the city, made lists of grant opportunities, startup accelerators, regional pitch competitions. Tara ran new experiments. Micah built the data dashboards and life cycle models. I refined the public-facing science and rewrote the patents under our new entity, Ren Materials, with me as majority holder. The name was my idea. Wren like the bird. Small, often overlooked, but clever enough to outfly giants. That week, I also filed the documents to revive Banyan Materials LLC and merge it under our new company. The original transfer deed Grandpa left made the process smoother than I expected. We had a company now, a prototype, a mission, but not a single dollar in the bank. Funding became the monster in the room. Every breakthrough we made was immediately counterbalanced by a lack of resources. We used expired lab reagents. We tracked every watt of electricity and every gram of material. Our office was a room above a used auto parts store, where the Wi-Fi cut out anytime someone turned on the coffee machine downstairs. Still, we pushed forward. While Tara optimized the polymer's flexibility for industrial packaging, Micah developed a compelling environmental impact model, showing how R7 could reduce landfill contributions by over 60% in controlled sectors. My job was to make sure the science didn't die in silence. I wrote pitch decks, created visuals, crafted narratives. I rehearsed lines in the mirror like they were incantations. But rejection was a familiar beast. The first pitch competition we didn't even place. One judge told me, "It's a cute idea, but no major packaging brand would switch for something so ideological." The second, we got a nod, a handshake, and a generic email 3 weeks later, not aligned with current funding strategy. By the third, I wasn't even angry. I just poured more coffee, adjusted the slides, and sent another dozen applications into the void. Then the article dropped. It was small, just a niche blog about sustainable startups, but the writer had done her homework. She'd found our provisional patent filings and reached out with questions. I answered them honestly, cautiously. She titled the piece The Granddaughter Who Dug Up the Future in Her Grandfather's Locker. The headline went mildly viral. Suddenly, we were getting emails, not from VCs, not yet, but from people, scientists, environmentalists, grad students asking if they could intern, a coffee shop in Michigan asking if they could try our packaging once it scaled, an indie cosmetics brand saying they'd love to partner. It wasn't capital, but it was validation, momentum. And then came the message from Faro Ventures legal counsel. Subject line: inquiry regarding proprietary materials. I read it 5 times. They wanted a meeting to clarify the scope and origin of recent intellectual property filings made under Wren Materials in connection with projects formerly shelved by Faro Ventures. I knew what this was. They'd found out, probably through Jason. Or one of his handlers. Or maybe someone in the blog's comments section had connected the dots. I didn't reply. Instead, I called Mr. Levingston, the family lawyer who had read the trust documents. I didn't fully trust him, but I trusted his fear of lawsuits more than I trusted Faro Ventures. He answered on the third ring. "Ms. Faro," he said, voice carefully neutral. "They're trying to challenge the polymer," I said. "The one my grandfather left me." There was a pause. Then, "I suspected as much. Can they win?" He exhaled. "If your grandfather filed the patents through a separate LLC, and if he legally transferred that to you, then you hold the rights. But they can still tie you up in litigation, delay your launch, drain your resources." "Perfect," I muttered. "I'll send you the original filing dates and tax records, proving separation from Faro Ventures. If they escalate, you'll need counsel. Independent counsel." I thanked him, hung up. Then I went to the lab and broke the news. Tara cursed under her breath. Micah just looked at me, exhausted. "We don't have money for a court battle." "I know. So what do we do?" Tara asked. I opened my laptop, pulled up our documentation, and stared at the rows of data, the lab photos, the testing logs. Then I clicked on our provisional patent and opened the section Grandpa had drafted nearly 10 years ago, his original problem statement, written in his careful, looping script. "We must build for tomorrow's Earth, not yesterday's market." I looked up. "We publish," I said. "We go public." Tara blinked. "You want to open source it, no. But we can submit a white paper, make it real in the eyes of the world, not just a prototype or a rumor. If we become a reference point in the literature, they can't erase us." Micah grinned. "Make the science undeniable." We spent the next week assembling everything. Graphs, chemical properties, degradation timelines, soil data, case studies. We submitted it to a mid-tier journal, one known for fast review cycles. Then we waited. And while we waited, I got a text from Jason. "Jay, heard you've been busy. Want to talk?" I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't respond. The article had shaken them. And now, instead of letters from lawyers, I was getting invitations to talk. They were scared, and that was something. 3 weeks later, the journal accepted our paper. They published it under Wren Materials Research Group, listing me, Tara, and Micah as lead authors. Within 48 hours, 3 university departments reached out for collaboration. Within 72, a mid-sized packaging distributor from Oregon emailed, "Can we schedule a demo?" And then, the Faro name returned. Not in a message, in a headline. Faro Ventures distances itself from legacy project. Amid IP controversy. They were trying to erase any trace they'd ever touched the polymer, probably in hopes of reclaiming it once we proved its value. But it was too late. The internet had receipts. The science was public. The narrative was ours now. and for the first time, I felt taller than the name they'd used to keep me small. We didn't celebrate with champagne, we couldn't afford it. Instead, we bought falafel wraps from the food truck 2 blocks away and ate them on the steps outside the lab. Tara toasted us with a can of flat ginger ale, and Micah poured the last of the lab's instant coffee into 3 mismatched mugs like we were royalty. It was small, imperfect, but it felt enormous. The publication of our white paper had changed everything. Not overnight, but steadily. We received offers from student researchers looking for internships. An assistant professor from Rice University asked to visit the lab. Someone from a think tank in Denmark offered us a speaking slot at a sustainability summit. But the real shift came when we were invited to a closed-door presentation hosted by the Department of Environmental Innovation, a semi-quiet, government-backed research group evaluating green technologies for federal grants. It was our first shot at serious money. The meeting was in D.C. The room was a windowless, gray-carpeted conference hall in a shared government building. We arrived underdressed and overly caffeinated, with our demo materials crammed into a repurposed suitcase and a sample of R7 inside a Tupperware container. I stood in front of a panel of 6 officials, each with a laptop, a notepad, and a face like carved stone. "Thank you for having us," I began. "We're Ren Materials, and we're here today because we believe the future of packaging and infrastructure has to be clean, scalable, and radically honest." Micah handled the data, presenting life cycle assessments and landfill impact reduction models. Tara explained the chemistry behind the polymer's flexible structure and its rapid, safe breakdown in soil and water. I closed with the origin story brief. Careful, real. R7 was a project buried before its time, not because it didn't work, but because it didn't make money fast enough. That's what my grandfather told me. We're not just trying to resurrect what he started, we're trying to prove it should have never been shelved in the first place. There were a few nods. A woman in a navy blazer tapped her pen against her tablet and asked, "If you receive the $500,000 $1,000 pilot grant, what's your first move manufacturing?" I said, "We've got partners interested, but they need proof of volume. Give us a chance to scale, and we'll show you exactly what R7 can do." They thanked us, said they'd be in touch. On the flight home, Tara stared out the window while Micah played Sudoku on his phone. I sat in silence, rehearsing all the things I should have said. Better metaphors, a stronger closing, a clearer ROI projection. We didn't know it yet, but we'd nailed it. 2 weeks later, the grant was ours. $500,000, restricted use, tight deadlines. But ours? We rented a warehouse on the outskirts of the city. It had a leaking roof and a family of raccoons in the back corner. But it was space. Real space. We set up a basic line with refurbished equipment. Micah coded a low-cost production tracker. Tara hired 2 interns from a local STEM program who showed up eager, underpaid, and full of ideas. I signed our first supplier agreement with a biodegradable packaging startup in Colorado. It wasn't huge, but it was recurring. We were in business. That's when I got the call. Unknown number. 202 area code. I picked up. Elise Farrow. Yes? This is Natalie Kim, senior editor at Ecoform Monthly. We'd like to do a feature on Ren Materials and on you. I blinked. Why me? She chuckled. Because you're the one who said no to $2 million and built something bigger instead. I didn't say no, I replied. They just didn't offer. There was a pause. Even better, she said. The article ran the next month. The cover read, "From Forgotten to Founder. How Elise Farrow is redefining sustainable innovation." They ran a photo of me in the lab, holding a strip of R7 next to a rack of test tubes. I looked tired, slightly out of focus, but the smile was real. Jason sent me a message 2 days later. Jay. I read it. It was actually kind of impressive. I mean that. I stared at the screen. Not congrats. Not, I'm sorry. Just that. I didn't reply. Instead, I printed the article, taped it on the fridge at the warehouse, and got back to work. But not everything was celebration. One evening, after everyone else had gone home, I sat alone in the office doing month-end numbers. We'd burned through 60% of the grant. Orders were growing, but so were costs. We were behind on one key certification, and one of our production mixers had started emitting a rattling sound that Tara said sounded like a death rattle. My chest tightened, the kind of tight that made you stop breathing for a second too long. I picked up Grandpa's notebook. I hadn't opened it in weeks. Just seeing it made something in me soften. Taped inside the back cover was the old photo me at age 8, standing in front of a school science fair display about compost. I was holding a handful of dirt and smiling like I'd just found gold. I whispered to the room, "What would you do now?" The notebook had no answer. But I already knew it. You keep going, even when it's hard, especially when it is. Because this thing, this company, this polymer, this choice, it wasn't about revenge or proving them wrong anymore. It was about proving me right. By the end of that year, we had upgraded from folding tables and borrowed microscopes to real production lines, albeit small, clunky ones. We'd signed 3 more supplier deals, one of them international. We started getting samples of our packaging into grocery stores and local cafes. The logo Tara designed, a stylized wren in flight, began showing up on paper cups, food wraps, and seedling trays. But with visibility came friction. Faro Ventures didn't send another legal notice. They didn't have to. Instead, they sent something quieter, sharper, a recruitment offer. Micah received an email from a Faro Ventures subsidiary offering a senior data role with 6 figures, full benefits, and a signing bonus that made all of us choke on our instant noodles. Tara got hers 2 days later, R&D director, open budget, relocation package. No mention of Wren, just a gentle suggestion that her talents might be better used in a more mature enterprise. Neither of them said anything at first. I found out when Micah accidentally left his laptop open during a planning session. I saw the email, just long enough to read the words transition pathway and quiet exit. I didn't yell, didn't accuse. I just asked, "Did they contact you too?" Micah froze. Tara looked away. "Yes," he said finally. "They want to split us," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "They want to buy us off," Tara added. For a moment, the room felt fragile. I didn't respond. Micah said, "Neither of us did." Tara nodded. "They think we'll jump for a bigger name. But this what we're building feels more real than anything they could throw at us." I believed them, but it shook me more than I wanted to admit, because deep down, I knew how this worked. When big money couldn't stop you legally, they tried to seduce the ground out from under your feet, and part of me feared that I couldn't hold this together if we started bleeding talent. Wren was still young. One wrong partnership, one bad shipment, one misstep, and it could all collapse. So, I doubled down. I started pitching harder, longer. Late-night Zoom calls, international grant applications. I attended conferences, often alone, shaking hands with people who stared at my name tag just a little too long before saying, "Oh, that Pharaoh." I got used to it. But some wounds reopened. At one event in Atlanta, after presenting on circular materials in retail supply chains, I was cornered by a man in a navy suit with a Faro Ventures pin on his lapel. "Impressive," he said. "You've built something interesting, and very persistent." "Thanks," I replied. already trying to walk away. He stepped in front of me. You know, we always wondered what happened to the polymer work Raymond was doing. Turns out, he left it to a ghost. I tilted my head. No ghost. Just the part of the family you tried to ignore. He smiled, thin and condescending. You could still come home. Elise, you've proven your point. We've noticed. I'm not interested in your version of home, I said. I'm building my own, and I walked away. That night, in the hotel bathroom, I cried harder than I had in years, not because I doubted myself, but because I hated that it still hurt that part of me still wanted someone in that family to say, "We were wrong about you." But I already had that. Grandpa's notebook was proof. The lab was proof. My team was proof. I wiped my face, straightened my shoulders, and got on a call with Tara and Micah to plan the next rollout phase. We secured a contract with a sustainable housing nonprofit testing eco-construction materials. R7 was perfect for their insulation panels and temporary structures durable, light, and earth-friendly. It was a new market, a big one. And then, for the first time, I let myself do something I hadn't done since the reading of the trust fund. I wrote to my grandmother. She'd always been quiet in the background, polite, distant, never cruel, never warm. But I remembered how she used to let me play in her garden while Jason went to etiquette lessons. I remembered her letting me climb the apple tree in the back, even when my mother said it was unladylike. So I sent her a short email. Subject: just thought you'd want to know. Body: we made it. It's called Ren Materials. We're launching our 6th product line, and it started in a locker, with him. Elise. I didn't expect a reply. 3 days later, I got one. Subject: you always had his eyes. Body: he used to tell me you were the one, not Jason, not even your father. I wish I'd listened sooner. Congratulations. I'm proud of you, Grandma. I read it twice, then once more, and for a moment, everything else, the pressure, the fear, the memory of rejection quieted, because someone had finally said it out loud. The letter from Grandma lingered in my inbox, like a quiet lighthouse. It wasn't long, wasn't dramatic, but it meant more than she could have known. I reread it every night that week, like a child tracing a constellation for the first time and realizing it was always there. But peace doesn't last long in startups or in families. 2 months after we launched the 6th product line, I got a certified envelope delivered to the lab. Faro Ventures versus Ren Materials, Inc., Cease and Desist, Intellectual Property, Dispute. My hands trembled as I opened it. The pages smelled like toner and arrogance. Pages of accusations claiming that R7 was materially derived from proprietary research owned by Faro Ventures. They were attempting to invalidate the transfer deed my grandfather had signed, suggesting fraudulent concealment and unauthorized usage of legacy corporate materials. I didn't speak. I just walked into the production floor and handed the envelope to Tara. She read it, eyes narrowing. Are they kidding? Micah scanned it over her shoulder. They're not trying to win. They're trying to bleed us dry. They were right. It was a pressure tactic, a slow suffocation. But we weren't the same team they underestimated a year ago. This time, I had allies, clients, journalists, a patent attorney who owed Grandpa a favor, and, most importantly, evidence. I called Mr. Livingston again. I was expecting this, he said calmly. You'll want to get someone aggressive. I don't have funds for a full-blown litigation war. You might not need to, but you do need to fight. Not just legally, publicly. He was right. So we prepared. My attorney drafted a formal response, citing the original LLC registration of Banyan Materials, the notarized transfer deed to me, and the date-stamped research logs Grandpa had maintained, all clearly disconnected from Faro Ventures' infrastructure. Then I made a decision that scared me. I agreed to a profile interview with The Atlantic. They'd reached out months before, intrigued by our story. I declined. I wasn't ready then. But now it wasn't about readiness. It was about survival. The interview lasted 4 hours. I told the whole story. The trust fund reading, the locker, the research, the first failure, the white paper, the offer to sell out. And now, the lawsuit. I didn't beg for sympathy. I just told the truth. When the article dropped, the headline read, "The Inheritance They Buried," and the granddaughter who dug it out. It spread faster than we expected. Science Twitter exploded. Environmental blogs picked it up. Even some legacy outlets begrudgingly started referencing the case. A segment aired on PBS with soft lighting and a voiceover that described me as a reluctant heir turned reluctant revolutionary. Then came the email I didn't expect. From Jason Farrow. Subject: "This is going too far." I stared at it for 10 minutes before opening it. Elise. This lawsuit was not my idea. I only found out after it was filed. I'm not in charge of everything. You know, Dad's still pulling most of the strings. But for what it's worth, I told them it was a mistake. Let me know if you want to talk. J. Part of me wanted to delete it, but another part, smaller, sharper, told me to respond. So I did. I don't want your guilt. I want your silence. If you're not part of the fight, stay out of the way. He never wrote back. Good. Because I had a battle to finish. Our legal team filed a counterclaim asking for a full dismissal and requesting Faro Ventures pay for damages to reputation, lost partnerships during the legal freeze, and emotional distress. We included every piece of evidence, every document Grandpa had left, every email, every timestamp, and we went public with the filing. That part wasn't easy. The media blitz brought trolls. Industry insiders called us reckless, ungrateful, naive. A few even suggested I was exploiting my family name for sympathy. But it also brought allies. A lawyer from a tech startup that had survived a similar shakedown offered strategic advice for free. A scientist in Belgium offered to replicate our results in her lab to further validate the polymer. A crowd-funded campaign started by a former Wren intern raised enough to cover 3 months of legal expenses. And one morning, I walked into the lab to find Tara and Micah waiting beside a whiteboard. "Read it," Tara said, grinning. Micah had written in block letters, "Case dismissed, motion granted." I blinked. "They dropped it?" I asked, stunned. "They didn't just drop it," Micah said. "The court ruled in our favor. Deed confirmed. Research affirmed. They can't touch you. Can't touch us." Tara threw her arms around me. "You did it?" "No," I whispered, voice shaking. "We did." I closed the lab door and sat alone with Grandpa's notebook in my hands. For the first time in months, I opened to the last page, the one I hadn't dared read before. It was just one line, written in the margin beside a fading ink blot. "If they come for her, I hope she roars." And I had. The victory wasn't loud. It didn't come with confetti or a party. It came with silence, the kind that follows the end of a storm. The Faro Ventures lawsuit had collapsed under the weight of its own arrogance. No appeal, no statement. Just a quiet line in the business section of the Wall Street Journal. Faro Ventures withdraws. Claim in IP dispute with independent research firm. I clipped it. Not out of spite, out of proof. Because for once, My name stood not beside an apology, not under a correction, but as its own headline, untouched, unapologetic. Still, I knew what this meant. The family had officially drawn the boundary. I wasn't just the black sheep now. I was the threat, the one who'd made it without them, the one who'd outlived the name. The next month, I was invited to speak at the Global Summit on Circular Innovation, held in Geneva. The email came with a handwritten note from the director herself. You remind me of my daughter. Curious, tireless, a little dangerous. We need more of that in this field. It was the kind of opportunity I used to dream of and dread. So when I stepped on that stage, facing an auditorium filled with scientists, engineers, and funders from around the world, I braced for nerves, but they didn't come. Instead, I felt grounded. I'm Elise Farrow. I began, founder of Wren Materials. We make materials that disappear when they're done serving you, unlike most of the systems we live in. A ripple of quiet laughter moved through the room, encouraging. I walked them through the birth of R7, the technical specs, the test sites in Colorado, Kenya, and Taiwan. But I ended with something else. I didn't grow up thinking I'd inherit a company. I didn't. I inherited a notebook, some old patents, a belief that the world deserved better, and a family that told me to go earn my own. I paused. The room held its breath. Well, I did. Applause wasn't thunderous. It was precise, focused, the kind that said, "We heard you." Afterward, people approached. Some asked about licensing, others offered partnerships, but a few just said thank you. One older woman in a green silk scarf took my hand and said, "My daughter just switched majors to environmental chemistry. I'm going to send her everything about your work." I smiled. "Tell her to contact us. We always need more scientists with something to prove." When I returned home, the Wren lab was buzzing. We had new interns, new contracts, a wait list for partners in 7 countries. The lab had outgrown its walls, so we secured a new property, an old orchard just outside the city, green space, solar roofs, a wildflower garden to attract pollinators. It didn't look like a research campus. It looked like hope. But I wasn't the only one who had changed. Micah had become our operations director, calmly weaving chaos into coordination. Tara led R&D with the sharp confidence of someone who no longer needed to prove her brilliance, she just was. Our interns stayed past their terms. Some asked to come back permanently. We let them. We were building something real, not just science, culture. Then, one afternoon in late fall, I heard the front door chime. I looked up from my desk, and there she was. My mother. I hadn't seen her since the trust fund reading. Almost 3 years. She looked smaller, hair silvered, lips pressed tight. Her eyes scanned the lobby like it was a crime scene. "Elise," she said, as if the word had thorns. "Mom," I replied, flat but not cruel. She glanced at the lobby wall, where our mission statement was printed in large type beneath the Wren logo. Make things that disappear. Build things that last. "I wanted to see it," she said quietly. "The place that's making headlines." I nodded. "It's not just me. It's a team." She held her purse with both hands. "I read your article, the one in the Atlantic. I didn't know how much you'd carried." "No," I said. "You didn't want to." Silence stretched between us. She walked past me slowly, fingers grazing a display shelf of R7 samples. "It's clean," she said. "Minimal." I didn't respond. "I suppose," she said, stopping near the lab door. This is the part where I apologize. I turned toward her. Is it? She blinked. For a second, I thought she might cry. But she didn't. I don't know what you want from me, Elise. Nothing, I said. Not anymore. She nodded slowly. I see that now. She looked around one more time, like trying to memorize it. Well, I just wanted to see it with my own eyes, to know it was real. It is, I said. Even if you never say sorry, it's still real. She left without another word. I stood at the window and watched her go, her figure small against the gravel drive. For a moment, I felt not triumphant, not angry, just free. That night, I stayed late in the greenhouse, pruning the tomato vines our student team had cultivated using compostable R7 grow trays. I ran my fingers through the soil and remembered Grandpa's words, etched on the back of the very first formula sheet he ever left behind. Soil remembers kindness. He'd been right, and now the world was starting to remember too. I didn't expect Jason to come back. Not after the lawsuit, not after the interviews, not after my reply to his email. The door was closed, as far as I was concerned. I'd locked it, bolted it, moved the furniture in front of it. But grief, real grief, doesn't knock. It slips in through the cracks. It was early spring when I saw him again. I was walking through the campus garden, reviewing notes for an upcoming trial with a biodegradable seed capsule we were testing. I rounded the bend near the water tank and froze. Jason stood at the front gate. He looked nothing like the person I remembered from that boardroom all those years ago. Gone was the tailored suit and perfect posture. His coat was wrinkled, hair unstyled, dark circles under his eyes. He held a manila folder in both hands like it was the only thing tethering him to the ground. I didn't say anything. I just waited. He cleared his throat. Hi. Why are you here? I've been reading, watching. The PBS segment, the Geneva keynote, the Little Scientist initiative. He paused. It's a lot. I raised an eyebrow. I assume you didn't come here for a tour. No, he said. I came to see if there's still anything I can do that isn't too late. I almost laughed. Almost. You sued us. He nodded, ashamed. I didn't sign the papers. That was Dad. I didn't even know he'd filed until I saw it in the news. And by then, it was too late. You could have said something publicly. You didn't. I know. He shifted the folder under his arm. I told myself silence was neutrality. But it wasn't. It was complicity. I studied him. He looked worn, not rehearsed, not charming, just stripped down. What's in the folder? He handed it to me. Inside were papers. A proposal. Typed, annotated, a little messy. The header read, Communication Strategies for Underserved STEM Students, a practical guide. I flipped through charts, templates, simple public speaking prompts, visual aids, a section on how to answer confidently when you're still unsure, another called Translating Lab Work into Stories. You wrote this, I asked. He nodded. For the kids, the ones from the program. I figured, I'm not a scientist, but I know how to talk, and I thought maybe I could teach them something you can't. The words sat between us like fragile glass. You don't expect me to forgive you. No, he said softly. I just want to show up differently. I stared at him, then at the guide in my hands. Come with me, I said. We walked across the campus in silence, past the greenhouse, the compost bins, the solar irrigation panels, to the community classroom where 5 students were working on science fair presentations. A girl named Leah was practicing her pitch about water filtration. She stumbled over her words when she saw me enter. Leah, I said, this is Jason. He's here to help. She blinked. Help with what Jason smiled. With this part, he said gently. Let's figure out how to make them understand what you see. He crouched beside her project and began asking questions, simple ones. Guiding, not correcting. The other students circled in. I stood by the door and watched. Not out of sentiment, but curiosity. And what I saw surprised me. He was good. Over the next month, Jason kept showing up. No announcements, no cameras. He just showed up. Twice a week. Every week. He worked with kids who mumbled, who avoided eye contact, who shrank into themselves when asked to explain their ideas. He showed them how to structure stories, how to hold their bodies when they spoke, how to breathe. And he never once mentioned his last name. At the end of the summer, during our Little Scientist showcase, one of the shyest students, Amber, age 12, delivered a flawless presentation on butterfly migration. When I asked her afterward how she felt, she said, "Coach Jay told me I don't need to sound smart. I just need to sound true." I found Jason later, sitting under the magnolia tree out back. "She was amazing," he said. "She always was. You just helped her see it." He looked down at his hands. "You know, I used to think love was a transaction, that if I performed right, smiled the right way, stayed close to the power, I'd be safe." "You were taught that," I said quietly. "So were you," he replied. "But you unlearned it." We sat in silence. The branches above us moved gently in the breeze. Somewhere behind us, the kids laughed over melting popsicles. "I'm not saying we're fixed," I told him. "I know. I'm not saying we're family." "I'm okay with that," he said. "But maybe we're starting something." I didn't respond. I didn't have to. Later that night, I walked into the main building. A new folder sat on my desk, Jason's communication guide. Version 2, revised, tightened, renamed. Speaking from the middle. A public voice guide for quiet scientists. On the inside cover, a sticky note. "They're listening. Let's teach them how to speak." And for the first time in years, the word brother didn't sound like a loss. It sounded like a start. We called it the Little Scientist Initiative almost as a joke. Tara had said it one night while stuffing lab kits into recycled boxes. "They're just little scientists, aren't they?" And the name stuck. But it didn't feel small anymore. By year 4, we'd expanded the program to over a dozen rural districts. Partnering with underfunded schools, we shipped experiment kits, hosted weekend labs, and trained local teachers in hands-on science instruction. Each student got a personal notebook, leather-bound and stitched like the one Grandpa gave me. On the first page, the same sentence was embossed in gold. "Write the things they don't understand. One day, the world will." It became our rallying cry. We saw students shy, chaotic, distracted transform. One girl built her own compost sensor using scrap electronics. A boy with a speech delay designed a water recycling system for his grandfather's farm. Every single one of them had something to say. They just needed a place to say it. And we gave them that. I remember one moment more than most. It was during a summer workshop in Georgia. A girl named Hannah, no more than 13, showed me pages of scribbled notes on bee colony behavior. Her handwriting was jagged, her math full of small missteps. But her mind was extraordinary. I stayed with her after the session, helping her simplify her findings. When I said, "You're on to something," she stared at me like I'd handed her a planet. "You actually read it," she whispered. I smiled. Of course I did. She started crying. Then I did, because that moment, so small, so personal, was the very thing I had longed for, growing up, someone to look at your ideas and not just see them, but believe in them. Later that night, I walked the edges of our annex fields. The sun was low, the crops glowing. Our test plots for drought-resistant grains had just shown their first promising results, and the research team was buzzing. I stopped by the bench Grandpa had built, the same one where I first read his letter aloud to myself. The wood was weathered now, but it held. So much had changed. Ren Materials had grown into something real. We had 4 labs, 3 greenhouse systems, a community classroom, and now a fellowship program for postgrads studying sustainable chemistry. Our seed trials were being replicated in Brazil and Namibia. Even the World Bank had come sniffing around, curious about our low-cost polymers' potential for infrastructure in high-flood regions. But more than that, more than scale, more than global reach, was the feeling that I finally understood what Grandpa meant when he said, "You were never a mistake. You were the legacy I was proudest of." Because this entire place wasn't built to prove anyone wrong anymore. It was built to let the right ones in. One afternoon, I was watching a group of 5th graders present their garden sensors when Vanessa walked in. No call, no warning, just appeared in the doorway of the workshop like a ghost from another timeline. Gone were the heels and perfect hair. She wore boots, jeans, a flannel shirt. Her eyes looked different, not softened exactly, but humbled. She watched one of the girls demonstrate moisture readings using an LED alert system. Then she turned to me. "They're brilliant," she said. "They always were." "I think I missed that growing up. You didn't look." She nodded. "I'm trying to now." She didn't ask for a second chance. She didn't talk about the trust fund, or the will, or the headlines. She just stayed, volunteered, quietly, twice a year now. Vanessa leads presentation workshops for the kids. She teaches them how to translate complicated data into plain speech, how to stand tall, how to begin a sentence without apologizing for it. The kids call her Coach V. I watched her last week, kneeling next to a boy whose chart had smeared during lunch. She helped him redraw it, guided his pitch rehearsal, adjusted his collar before he went on stage. After the showcase, she handed me a folder. "I wrote a guide," she said, a little embarrassed. "For the shy ones. It's not perfect, but maybe it helps." Inside were tips, worksheets, role-play prompts, and a final page titled, "What to Say When You Think You Don't Belong." The advice was simple, honest. You don't have to belong everywhere. Just somewhere. Start here. I didn't cry, but I held the folder like it was made of gold. Later that night, I sat by the annex windows, watching the last of the summer light fade over the corn trials. Micah had gone home. Tara was still in the lab, humming over some new experiment. Jason was in the classroom, helping 2 students prep for regionals. I was alone, but not lonely. Because in this space, this ecosystem we'd built, no one had to pretend anymore. We didn't erase the past. We didn't rewrite it. We just planted something better. And it was growing. 6 years after the trust fund reading, I stood at the front of an auditorium in San Francisco, accepting a national grant for climate innovation. The spotlight was warm on my skin, but I didn't flinch. I wore a navy blue suit, one pocket lined with something old, Grandpa's pocket watch, polished and gleaming under the stage lights. Tucked inside its lid, a faded photo me at 10 years old, beaming beside a trifold presentation board titled "Honeybee Communication Patterns in Pollination." Grandpa had taken that picture. Grandma told me later he'd carried it with him every day. Now, it sat on my desk at Ren Materials, catching the morning light, casting little circles across our seed design maps. Some days I still speak to him, not out loud, not with words, but in the quiet between meetings, in the late hours when the data won't align, or when a kid from the Little Scientist Initiative wins a scholarship and sends us a letter written in crayon and pure pride. He never let me disappear. Not really. And now I understand why. Legacy isn't a statue or a plaque. It's not a dollar amount or a marble nameplate on a building wall. It's a map built from acts of trust, tiny choices, and silent revolutions. It's a handful of seeds left behind in the hopes that someone will plant them differently. These days, Grandma lives in a small apartment connected to my house in town. She's slower now, more forgetful, but still sharp where it counts. Every morning we drink coffee in the sunroom. She tells me stories about Grandpa that never made it into the letters, how he once planted an almond tree just to propose, how he wrote down every new word I learned as a toddler, how he once told her, "That girl's got a brain like thunder. If we're lucky, the world won't scare her quiet." I didn't stay quiet, and I'm not scared anymore. Ren has grown beyond anything I thought possible. What started in a decaying locker with a dusty notebook is now a global research initiative. We have 4 campuses, partnerships with universities in 7 countries, and field projects working on everything from drought-resistant crops to zero-waste building materials. We've published over 40 papers in the last year alone. Our internship applications exceed 10,000 annually. But it's not the scale that humbles me, it's the direction. Because we're not just solving problems, we're asking better questions. Every day. I see kids like Hannah and Amber, Jason's mentees, our interns, our fellows picking up pieces of science with curiosity, not fear. They are not racing towards success to be seen. They are already seen, already welcomed, and that, I've learned, is what real inheritance looks like. Not the mansion, not the stock portfolio, but the space to begin. Sometimes, late in the day. I walk to the far end of the annex fields past the solar irrigation systems and the student garden plots to the old wooden bench Grandpa built. The bench looks out over the hills, where we've planted trees to restore the soil. From there, I can see the stars, real ones this time. Not the plastic ones I stuck to my childhood ceiling, but they still make me think of that girl, the one with dirty knees, wide eyes, and too many questions. The one who clutched a trophy with both hands and asked if she should hide it. I think about her when I sign grant approvals, when I visit new classrooms, when I see Jason smile, tired but proud, after a student presentation, when Vanessa drops off her latest curriculum guide, when Micah jokes that we should all retire and let the interns run the place, when Tara, ever the scientist, still insists on running one last test at midnight just to be sure. I think about her and how she made it here, because of a man who saw her when no one else did, a man who left her nothing, and in doing so, left her everything. On nights when the wind moves just right, I swear I can hear his voice in the leaves, write the things they don't understand. One day the world will, and now it does.